Welcome to Athlete Evolved. We have Matt Blood, Director of Player Development with the Baltimore Orioles. Matt, why don't you get us started with just talking about your experience, your path as someone who has been concentrated on developing players through baseball?
My path is, let's see, I started, 15 years ago, really getting involved in baseball, all the way back into, playing growing up. But when I got to school and college, I started getting involved with the UNC, University of North Carolina baseball program, as a student assistant to their coaching staff. And that's where I really started to learn different parts of the game and kind of at a new level. And then from there, just kind of wound through different experiences that helped add different tools to my tool belt. From scouting with the Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinals. I ran the U.S. junior national team program for a few years for USA Baseball, and then last year with the Texas Rangers and player development, and then here now with the Orioles. So it's been a really enjoyable career of learning different aspects of the game, and here we are now.
Sure. So a couple things is, you've been at a few stops and you've seen, I'm sure, maybe some of the same players, but a lot of different players in different settings. So let's talk first and foremost about what you've seen over time with the needs, the desires, the wants of how it once was with players into how it is today for some players.
I mean, I don't think things are that different. I think players just want to get better. And now we have better information, and the players know that, and they want that information. They want to know why we're proposing to do what we are proposing to do. And it's our job to show them that. It's our job to provide them with real information and real data as to where they currently are and where we want them to go and how that's going to happen.
Great. So I'm going to go back to a few of your stops. You were a scout. Usually with scouts, they look at the physical skills, but we know that there's much more to that. So talk about the other attributes of a player and a person that you would try to gauge or try to understand, and how you went about that process.
Well, yeah, on-field skills are extremely important. The 5 tools, people know about those. But then watching them play the game and their instincts and their competitiveness and their feel are all very important too. And then you also try to get to know what kind of person they are, what kind of teammate, what kind of worker off the field and leader and those type of things. So all of that goes into your overall evaluation.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into that. What helped you to do those kind of things? Were you having sit downs? Were you having phone calls? I don't know if you were doing Zooms back then, but that's kind of the easy thing now. What kind of stuff or protocol would you factor in to understand?
Try to get around them as much as you can. Try to get as close to them as you can. As a scout, sometimes that's difficult. With a college program. So then you talk with the college coaches, or you talk with teammates or summer ball coaches. You try and get a session with the player himself, or you show up and you watch practice. You watch the way he interacts. Just talking with as many people as you can to get a feel for him. When I was at USA Baseball, I was fortunate to be able to be on the field and around these players all the time and get to go through competition with them. And through that, you really get a good feel for how they interact with coaches, with each other, and how they deal with adversity and challenges. And I learned a lot in that environment about what makes players tick and what's important.
Sure. I'm glad you brought up USA Baseball, because that was actually where I was going with this next one. It's a little different than being a team or, scouting, because you have those guys for a finite amount of time. The other angle of this, and I could be totally off base, so tell me if I am, is that you have really the best of the best. So you might have a player who is traditionally a shortstop, but he's moving over to third, or a guy who, maybe is a third baseman, but he has to pitch a little more than you've ever wanted, because it's kind of like an all-star team. So how do you manage that? Most importantly, the person with that kind of factors in play.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's a big part of that process. And it shows character, it shows makeup. And we had to do a good job of finding out on the front end if the players were willing to be team players. Because you're right, you've got a bunch of guys who are used to playing their position, and they're used to being the best player in their state, and for them to show up on a team where they might not be the fourth best player on the team, or they might be the third best shortstop on the team, and so they need to play left field or somewhere else. I mean, a great example is Royce Lewis. He was out of Southern California. He ended up being the number one pick in the draft by the Minnesota Twins, and he played center field, left field, a little bit of second base, and a little bit of third base for us on a gold-winning team. And he was completely fine doing that because that's the kind of kid he is. But he was drafted and still to this day plays shortstop, in the Minnesota Twins system, and he's the first pick in the draft. So he's a great example of a person who was willing to do that. C.J. Abrams, same thing. He was a top 10 pick this past year with the Padres. A very talented shortstop, and we played him mostly in center field because Bobby Witt Jr. was on the team, and he plays shortstop also. And CJ went out in center field and did it great every single day, and another gold medal winning team. So you have to make sure on the front end that you're aware of how they feel and if they're willing to do that.
Yeah, one of these aspects that you have to consider is developing relationships, right? In every part of your job, and we'll talk more about your relationships with the coaches, but with those guys, they can be going through a lot mentally in terms of, I have to switch positions. Is this now who I am? Or, am I going to switch positions? Does that mean I lose out to this player or that player? And the other part is the way Major League Baseball and really sports is evolving is there's this whole versatility need, right? If you can play multiple positions, you can get up there quicker. So how do you kind of manage that relationship so that you're not just selling them on that, but also just understanding who they are?
Getting to know them at a younger age is important. Developing that relationship, developing the trust, showing them that you care, but also just clarity, I think is really important. They need to know why, and they need to know what the situation is, and we were very clear about it from the beginning that this is a team, this isn't a showcase, this is about putting together the best team possible, and that may mean that you need to play other positions that you don't primarily play. And that typically worked it out because these players wanted to be a part of these elite teams and playing with other elite players. And that was how we went about it.
Sure. All right, now I'm going to pivot into a different role that you've had, but baseball innovation, right? I don't think that's a title that many people have. Maybe they do what that actually means, but what does that look like to the people who are listening who have no idea? How does that incorporate the person, the player, and everything else involved?
Good question. So that role was innovative in itself, I think. And I was only in that role for, a month maybe. And the role was really designed to have somebody solely focused on researching and getting familiar with new techniques or better techniques for the development of players. It was also to get to know coaches, and future staff. And so that was the idea behind it. And it was an interesting role, and it was fun. I learned a lot doing that. But like I said, I only stayed in it for about a month before coming over to the Orioles. So I never really quite got that off the ground.
Well, the interesting thing is, getting to know you a little bit prior to this podcast is, I know that a lot of that answer that you just gave is a lot of how, not only how you got your job, but what you're doing in your current role. So I want to talk more about that. Let's talk about the coaching part. So talk to me about the process of hiring coaches, what's important in that process to you, but then also to them in the organization.
Hiring a staff, in my opinion, is one of the most important things that we can do as we try and build a culture and we try and provide the best development experience for everyone involved, not just the players. I mean, the players are the ultimate in game, but for me, it's also our staff is got to be involved in a highly collaborative and learning environment. And so when we hire, we have to find out if people are interested in, inspired by, driven to learn and to collaborate. And so that's what we spend a lot of time on doing. Our three main pillars are humility, growth mindset, and collaboration. And so we want to make sure that the people that we hire have those ingrained characteristics. On top of that, obviously, we want people with coaching acumen, with knowledge, with skills that they can bring that will help move us forward in the development of our players.
Sure. So without giving away any secrets or ingredients to how you do that, how do you find in the interview process if they have those things? I mean, in a way, it's easy to find humility, but like, how do you find out if they have the growth mindset? Are you giving them tests, or are you asking them certain questions? What's your process for that?
Well, one of the things I look for on paper and then through questions is a demonstrated history of growth. Have they shown that they have taken experiences and grown from them? And have they built upon opportunities? Have they looked for opportunities that were challenging, and what did they do in those? Did they fail? If so, no, it's not the end of the world. What did they do after that? And actually, a lot of times, people that have had those bumps in the road or some struggles and have improved and pulled themselves out of it, to me, are really attractive type of people. So I look for those type of things. But to really get to know who they are, you got to put them in those environments. And you got to find out how they perform, how they interact in collaborative, uncomfortable environments. And that's what we try to do in many of our interviews is put them in those environments and see how they do.
Sure. So you're creating a system, right, that kind of is pumping out development for players. At the same time, you have these coaches that are the extensions of, what you're designing. So let's take a step back a little bit and talk more about the curriculum for both on field and off field, and tell us, more about what you're doing in that approach, but then what helped you to get there.
Let's see. On the field, the on-field curriculum is dynamic. I mean, we have our pillars of fundamentals that we want to make sure and coach, but we also want the players to be a part of that process. So it's very much a open dialogue, a give and take between the player and the coach. We want the player to feel a part of the process. We want the player to own his part of the process, and so that takes collaboration between and humility, between the coach and the player. So that's a big part of what we want to do. We also want to provide data-driven reasons for why we recommend what we recommend, and then we also want to be able to provide the player with data-driven results to their progress. And we want to show them that this is what we're working on, this is where we're trying to go, and this is the progress that we're making. So that would be on the field, and then off the field, we work on um, everything that people want to work on. People want to get better at Spanish. We put together that. If we want to get better at writing code on a computer, we try and put together programs for that. Whether it's reading kinematic sequences or um, books. We have book clubs. We have all sorts of different areas that we want to provide for our staff and for our players to improve themselves. We want, like I said, we want to create a um, high learning environment for our people.
Sure. We'll talk a little bit about the high learning environment towards the end, but I want to continue to go with the coaches and players and developing them as people. So you build this design curriculum, and then you want your coaches to execute it as designed, right? And to develop these players. So how would you define, on the overview, your leadership philosophy, and then how does it convey all the way from top down, but make it sustainable and measurable?
My leadership philosophy is one of hire great people, trust those people, ask them questions, and allow them to do what they do well. And then try and nudge them along the way whenever they need help. And I promote collaboration, and I promote learning, and let them run with it. And I try not to get in the way. I try and just provide them with the resources and the support that they need. So that's my philosophy. I mean, I have other things as well, as we want to be evidence-based and process-oriented as much as we can. But to me, it's really important that we collaborate and we try and learn from our mistakes. Something we talk about is, let's not be afraid of failure. Let's try things. Let's learn from the outcomes, and let's just continue to get better. And there's no need for blame. There's no need for excuses. There's only a need to push forward and get better from whatever outcomes that we've had. So I'd say that's really what I try and do, is empower our staff to be who they are, but continue to push themselves to get better.
Sure. So taking that philosophy, how do you instill that in the culture and the processes that you talked about to concentrate on the overall person behind the player? Because we can even just look at it systematically. A guy gets drafted, a guy gets signed, a guy gets traded to the Orioles. What happens next in terms of getting him on board with all that, getting the coaches to embrace that player, but really most as a person to buy into what you guys are doing?
It's a good question. I think it's something we're still, it's an ongoing process of formulating that, but we have group meetings. We have a bunch of presentations. We talk about it all the time. Our staffs are broken into committees, and inside of those committees, they talk about their different topics, whether it's infield, outfield, base running, hitting, strength and conditioning, whatever it is, coach development. All these committees, they meet on a almost daily basis during spring training, and then they meet kind of weekly during this period, but to discuss what can we do better, what needs to happen, and how can we take it to the players in a better way. And then we meet with the players, and we have, like I said, we have open dialogue, and we make sure that they're engaged, and we ask for their feedback. And we just try and show them that this isn't a dictatorship. This is very much a collaboration. And through that, I think we are able to get buy-in, but we're also able to improve our product to them, which is the ability to learn.
Sure. So everything you're saying, collaboration, mindset, not being afraid to fail and learn from it. It all comes back to what I just said, which is the growth mindset. I know it's something you feel very passionate about, but it's not as simple as saying like your growth mindset or your fixed mindset. I think we can both agree on that. So how do you navigate to find out the mindset of your coach, B, your player, and then C, like the coworkers and staff that you work with, because that's equally as important?
Well, I would say growth mindset is one of the more misunderstood terms. It's not, like you just said, one or the other. Everybody has both tendencies within them. To me, it's a mindfulness thing where you identify your fixed mindset triggers and you try and deal with them when they come up. Right? We all have them. I have them. We all have them. And so just knowing that as a leader is important. You're not always going to have a drive to be growth minded. That's the first step, is just being aware. And then from there, we try and create an environment where it is how we act. And when you are in a fixed mindset, it stands out because everyone else is pushing towards that growth mindset. But it's not a judgmental thing. Like we want to help, but we want to just get better. And so, we talk about it a lot. We've had a book club on it. It's just part of our culture. And then when we have new people, or when we're trying to identify if people have it or not, I think you look for those demonstrated histories of growth, and you ask them how they've dealt with failure in the past, and you ask them how they've gotten to where they are, and why are you, whether it's a player, how did you get to be the best player, in your state? How did that happen? Was it, I just was good. I'm just better than everybody else. I've always been better. Or, I had to work really hard and I wasn't good at this, but now I am because I did this. And how did you deal with failure? Well, I don't like hitting off of the curveball machine because I'm no good at it. So I don't ever do it. Right? Okay. Well, if you want to get better at it, we got to work at it, and not run away from it. So just through having those types of conversations is how you can identify where people's tendencies are, but it's not the end all be all. And I think if you can help educate and explain, and then also create an environment where growth mindset is the norm, then more people will become comfortable with it.
Sure. So I like how you ended that with being comfortable, because I'm going to throw in the wrench of the pandemic and everything going on now. It's really an opportune time to harness a growth mindset in some categories, maybe not everything, but like, you talk about personal, professional, physical, in terms of your development. How can these players who are likely in a non-structured rut because they're not used to being indoors all the time or not being with their teammates all the stuff, how can they task, I guess, that growth mindset a little more than usual?
Yeah, in theory, this should be the best time to learn. Like there's no better time than right now to push yourself to learn in whatever areas you feel like you need to learn. That's important. I mean, we all want to feel a sense of purpose and significance. And through this period, especially for baseball players who feel like their purpose and their significance is playing baseball, has been taken away from them. So the first thing is I'm empathetic to mental stress or well-being during this time where people feel like they've lost their purpose. And we need to be sensitive to that, and then also explain and educate that, okay, you can't play right now, but there are other things that you can do to get better and to be purposeful, or to have a purpose. And so our staff and even players have taken upon themselves to learn in a ton of different areas. We've done a lot of fun, interactive learning activities that I think have brought us together in some productive ways, but also have inspired us to learn. And I think we're going to be better for it, when this thing does finally clear up.
Okay, so a lot of talk about education, a lot of talk about learning and kind of making this the higher priority. I have a couple questions unique to baseball, which is you're in a position where you have to deal with athletes of all different educational backgrounds. You talked about, teaching Spanish or just having them learn Spanish, but you have players who are coming straight from high school, maybe who are even younger than high school age, coming from college, whether they graduated or, are 21 and they didn't finish that degree. That's a battle in itself, maybe not a negative one, but how do you deal with that in terms of the education and just looking at the holistic person? Because it's not like a college professor like me who has a freshman coming in, this is a ripe, fresh mind. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, we do. We have a variety of different types of people. But I will say that they're all capable of learning, and they all have a desire to get better. That's why they're here. And we just have to figure out how to meet them where they are and to learn their style of learning and what inspires them. And I think that's what our coaches I've been really happy with or impressed with, really, their ability to do that, to talk with each player and find out, okay, this player communicates in this way, and this player likes to talk about these things, and this player understands these things, and we're going to work in those parameters, and then we're going to build on top of that. And yeah, you get a player who's still 17 years old, out of a rural part of the country, who he's going to be different than the players we draft out of Stanford as juniors and seniors. That's just the way it is, but it doesn't mean that they're both not capable of learning, and they're both not capable of understanding and improving. We love all of our players. That's our job. We don't evaluate or judge our players. We love our players, and they all have the ability to learn, and we're going to do everything we can to help them learn. And part of that process for us is learning ourselves.
Sure, I think to learning yourself also helps with just assessing where you are with each player. Like you said, the coaches are a huge help in terms of understanding how that player's learning style is, or how they like to receive information, whether it's a text or email, and things like that will help you to get your message across, but then also allow for that open communication and collaboration, which you talked about. So as we start to wrap up, is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you'd like to add that you guys are working on, that you're doing, either through this time or just an overarching strategy or pillar?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've hit on our main things. This is just a very unique, unprecedented time right now. And I will say that I've been inspired and really impressed with the way our staff has gone about taking advantage of it. It's not ideal. We all wish that we were on the field playing and practicing, but we're not. And instead, we're doing a lot of other things that are highly productive. And I think when we get back, it's going to show that we're in a better place. And I've been really happy that we've taken that approach and not just kind of go into hibernation mode or off-season mode. We've continued striving to improve. We've continued collaborating, and I think our group has gotten closer because of all of those things. And that's what we're going to continue to try to do once we finally are able to get back together as well.
Yeah, I think you guys have done a really interesting job of during this pandemic staying engaged, and not only staying engaged with your players, just keeping in touch with them, but staying engaged with the coaches who are also the other kind of receiver of information to relay that to the players. I know we talked earlier about the off the field curriculum, and I think what you guys are doing is you're able to kind of look at that from a different lens now, because it's off the field, but you're still like in season, and you're doing a good job of kind of staying engaged, staying on top of that. I think the other part is, if teams aren't doing this, or if players and coaches aren't doing this, they might fall behind to the teams that are. And I think what you guys are realizing, there's a unique way to stay engaged, even if you're not physically there or anything else. And part of that is using technology. So I applaud what you guys are doing. I think it's perfect for this pandemic and for this working from home kind of new environment that we're in. But thank you for concentrating on the athlete. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being a guest on Athlete Evolve.
I mean, I want to respond to that a little bit. I think every team is doing what they need to do during this time. It's professional baseball. It's a highly competitive environment. We, as an organization and as a staff, we're in a different place maturity-wise than many others. Our staff is brand new, and we had a lot of work to do to get caught up to speed in many areas. There are some other staffs that are mature, and they're probably going about it in a different way, and that's completely fine too. So I wouldn't say that what we're doing is any better than what anyone else is doing. I would just say what we're doing is what we need to be doing for where we are right now, and the maturity of our staff. It's been great. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. Thank you again for being a guest on Athlete Evolve.